What's up, everybody? It's Matt Johnson. We are back with another episode of Real Estate Uncensored. This is the place where you get actionable ideas, insight, and inspiration to turn your real estate career into a life of freedom. We've got a really interesting and phenomenal guest here. He is a real estate agent, broker, and a fellow podcast host. And we're talking about how to build social good and social entrepreneurship into your business. If you want more fulfillment, more impact out of your business, I think this is a great conversation. We're also going to talk about podcasting for real estate agents and brokers. So if you are in that realm where you're thinking about starting a podcast and to boost your real estate business, we're actually going to start off talking about that a little bit. But first, the Junior Grandmaster himself is in the co-pilot seat where you so belong. And fortunately for all of us listening, he has put the Pringles away. He's no longer, he spent all of pre-show chewing in my ear. So thankfully for the audience, he's done with that. Greg McDaniel, what's up today?
But Matt, they're Pringles wavy. And they're roasted jalapeno. I mean, they deserve it.
Yeah, that explains the increasing annoyance of how loud that crunching sounded. It sounds like you were throwing drywall screws down a garbage disposal.
It wasn't that bad, you fucking exaggerator. Dude, okay, so this last weekend, right? I was telling you before we got on the show that like my back is a little sore. For the mere small reason is that I carried nearly 2,000 pounds of gravel by hand at my girlfriend's house because we re-landscaped her backyard. I don't know why people do that. It was hugely painful, but it's very gratifying. And I made my own cornhole bags. I made my own cornhole bags with my own hands. I sewed them myself, and they look awesome. They haven't broken yet, so that's even a bigger bonus. Anyways, I'm actually really interested to see what Scott's going to talk about. He has coined himself as not the typical broker. So I am fascinated to kind of see what that's going to look like, how it's going to we're going to be able to take some of that model and put it into our own lives. So, dude, Scott, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I wish you would have saved that story about the gravel and the girlfriend, though, because now I can't have my wife listen to this podcast episode because what I've been getting away with for years is I don't do anything around the house. And I always tell her, listen, we need to, my job's to help get this economy growing. And anytime I do stuff around the house, I'm putting somebody out of work, and it's, so anyway, but
hey, you've got my vote. I'm with you, Scott. I have zero interest in doing that. I have tried. I've done landscaping. I grew up around my dad remodeling everything that could possibly be remodeled. So I've done everything from drywall to commercial painting, and it's all terrible. It's all forms of manual labor. Not interested, including working on cars. I've done it all, and it all sucks. So you get my vote on that. But let's start with the podcasting thing. So we were having an interesting conversation before we hit record because you're hosting a podcast around your passion and around some of the social entrepreneurship, the topics that we're going to talk about today. And you were thinking about podcasting into the real estate space because you're a broker. So tell me a little bit about the podcast that you have right now, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you were thinking.
Yeah, sure. So the podcast I have right now, it's and let me be clear with everyone. So I'm really fascinated by that whole space. I mean, I'm a guy. I'm in my 50s. A couple of years ago, I had heard about podcasting. I had never listened to a podcast. Started listening, got kind of hooked, and then just started hearing about the tremendous growth opportunities there in terms of expanding your reach and so forth. So I looked into it, and so I started this podcast called Dreaming of Cooperstown. Dreaming of Cooperstown is a metaphor for achievement and learning to lead a meaningful life. And what I define a meaningful life as is when you positively impact other people. And it's kind of it's really there's three events that kind of put me on this path, if you will. And one of those events has to do with baseball, which I'm a passionate baseball fan. Some of your audience members may know that the Baseball Hall of Fame is in Cooperstown, New York, and it's kind of where you memorialize the elite athletes, the elite baseball players, and again, it's part of my story, and so that's where the name came from. But it's really about sharing stories of people that are inspiring, stories of people that are doing, great things to make a difference in other people's lives, whether it's in their schools, their communities, or in the world. And so I try to share those stories, hoping that by shining a spotlight on them, that maybe some of my listeners will be inspired to donate to them, help them along on their mission, or maybe be inspired to start their own nonprofit, or do whatever it is that they've been thinking about. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's been rewarding, and I'm enjoying it.
Very cool. And part of the reason why it came up is we were talking a little bit behind the scenes about whether you should change or add or start a separate podcast directly to promote your real estate business, right? Tell us a little bit just briefly about the brokerage so people kind of understand the structure, and then we'll talk a little bit about the podcasting angle.
Yeah. So I've always been that entrepreneurial guy. I've had my own business. When I first got in the business just over 30 years ago and was licensed, I was exclusively a mortgage broker, and I did mortgages for about 20 years, and then decided that I thought I wanted to stick my toe into real estate brokerage. Wasn't sure if I really wanted to get into it. Obviously, I've been working with realtors for 20 years on the mortgage side. And so I decided to stick my toe in the water, see if it was something I really wanted to do. And I like it. I love it. And so each year for about the last dozen years or so, my business has shifted more towards doing more real estate deals. I've never given up the mortgages because it gives me, I think, it gives me like a unique advantage, especially when I'm working with my buyers. I can help them find the home, finance the home, and do all of that. So that's, I've always, that's part of the reason I've decided to always stay on my own. Mostly because if I went to work for a big brokerage, they wouldn't want me in the mortgage space. And if I went to work for like a big bank, they wouldn't want me in the real estate space. And so I've always decided that I was going to kind of run my business, around myself, and that way I can kind of do what I do things the way that I wanted to do.
Yeah. Complete control, customization, and then you can be almost like a one-stop shop for buyers, assuming that they, with their consent, of course. But so we were talking a little bit about the marketing, just how that is presented, and you were thinking about starting a podcast for real estate. And I just had a couple of agents reach out to me the other day. I think they're hosting a podcast aimed at agents, and they wanted to bring me on as a guest. I think I'm on their show in a couple of weeks to talk about this topic and really go deep, but I'll give people kind of a sneak peek, which is that I'm not a huge fan of starting a podcast specifically for like the general public. Greg, you and I have talked about this a lot, and that's actually where the original idea for Real Estate Uncensored came from, at least the title. That title came along, I don't know, you and I were working on a video series for buyers and sellers way before we ever did anything live, or way before we started the podcast. And I think, didn't we come up with the Real Estate Uncensored name at that point because you wanted to give people like this behind the scenes peek into what real estate was really like, almost like your own reality show. I think that was the original idea for it, which we did through a video series, which I think is a lot better. They were like short 3 to 5 minute videos where you went deep into like all the behind the scenes stuff, but it was all very chunked out, right?
Yeah, that was it. Now we just joke around. We put the uncensored there because I'm uncensored.
You are uncensored. I tell everybody that when I tell them what show I host, I'm like, it's called Real Estate Uncensored, and it's called that for a reason because my co-host is very uncensored. There's no way to babysit him into being anything less. So if agents or brokers, for the most part, even ask me about podcasting for real estate, I think podcasting, at least right now in the space that we're in, works better B2B, not B2C. And I don't think people are interested enough in real estate on an ongoing basis. They're really only passionately interested about real estate for about 3 months, and then they are passionately disinterested about it the rest of the time. So it's not a great audience to try to go straight to with a podcast. I think it's really great for very small chunks of content like videos, or just to give people a behind the scenes peek into our lives on social media. But I don't recommend a podcast for real estate because their attention level is not there the majority of the time, and they're not interested in the content. And part of the reason why I think real estate agents exist is because they're not interested in learning what goes on behind the scenes. They want to hire an expert to hold their hand. And so I think the more that we try to pull the curtain back and show them the complexity, I think they want to know that we have the details taken care of, but they don't actually want to understand as much as we would like them to want to understand.
It's kind of like wearing a nice watch. We don't really give a shit how the damn thing works. Just make it tell the time every single hour on the hour accurately, and I'll buy the expensive watch. Same thing. You know, so it's I'm actually learning that on my radio show. Is that, I mean, people, they like the information, but they're more interested in the things that HGTV's already nailed. They want to talk about the fix and flips. They want to talk about the investments. They want to talk about financing. They want to talk about money. How to get my home ready for summer, they could give two rat shits about. And I thought they would really care, but they just don't. Which is amazing, because everyone talks about real estate and you're like, well, why wouldn't you want to know how it works? Well, it's the same thing about the watch. I don't care how it works. Just make it work. Give me what I want. So that's what I'm finding.
Yep, exactly. So Scott, I was telling you behind the scenes that like what you're already doing, I think is perfect. And I think I would lean into it and just make sure that everyone in the database gets it, because they know what you do. And if you make it clear that you're a broker and all that stuff, like they'll come to you, but they'll connect with you on the social good stuff, because that's what you're passionate about.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And that's exactly what I've been struggling with. I believe in podcasting and I like what I'm doing, but I somehow felt like I was worried that I was going to be confusing people. And I thought, so does the real estate specific podcast solve that? But no, that's great advice. And I've started doing more video around the stuff that'll live on my website, or that I can just repurpose and use along the way. And just, it makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it.
Well, here's a thought, Matt. What about him taking his podcast currently and then just start preferencing it with, a header and a footer of, hey, this is Scott, we're with, ABC Realty. Today, we're going to be talking about blah, 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 yakety schmack on the podcast, and then end it. Hey guys, thanks for listening. This is Scott with ABC Realty. If you guys like this, please like me. If you have any questions about real estate, please reach out to me. I mean, what about doing something like that so you can marry the two of them? Thoughts, Johnson?
Marry the two of.
That's an official example of you completely blanking me out.
That's I did blank you
relationship.
I know.
I think he was.
I thought you were asking Scott a question.
You were so busted on that. I saw that as well. I think you're thinking about the potato
I think Greg just switched the question midstream to change it to me because he saw that I wasn't paying attention.
No,
it's you guys are conspiring.
This is a dysfunctional relationship.
Well, look, confusing the public is a legit concern. So Scott, I do want to address that, because when we talk about our passions and we're marketing ourselves that way, and we're talking about something other than real estate, yes, there is the possibility, and I understand the concern of being of wondering whether we're confusing the audience. When we're talking about something like this, though, where it's part of our passion, it's what we're doing through our business. As long as you're clearly stating who you are and the company that you represent, I don't think it's confusing, because it all ties into the greater thing. I think you could also potentially get more clear about that just in terms of the way that you present it, either through, let's say, a mid-roll commercial in your podcast, or at the end of the podcast, summing up everything with a little call to action like this. Like, hey, if you're in real estate and you want to work with people who are passionate about doing social good through their business, and you believe in our mission here, and you're in the situation where you're in the real estate market either to buy or sell, please consider us. Obviously, if you're the type of person that has the same passions that we do for doing good through our business, you want to work with people who you can know and like and trust, and we feel like we're probably in that same group for you. So please reach out. Let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to help. And that just ties the two together and explains that the reason that we do this is because we care and we're passionate about it, and we want to work with other people who are too. That's how I would, if you don't want to talk about, Greg, about tying things together, that's how I would tie things together. How's that? How's that for not paying attention?
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Yeah, exactly. What was that? I wasn't listening. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
No, that's great. Actually, another thing that I was thinking about, and I'm really close to pulling the trigger on this, is so I spend a lot of time around, I believe in this whole idea of, like, one of my life principles is, like, be a lifelong learner. Growth matters, and we're always, we're always trying, just personally and professionally, like, to get better. And so because and I do that primarily through books and podcasts and so forth. And so you're probably maybe familiar with Tim Ferriss, and he's not the only one, but there's guys that they put out these little weekly. I think Ferriss calls it like 5 Bullet Friday.
5 Bullet Friday.
I think. Yeah. And so I thought, you know what? I'm doing all this anyway. I'm fascinated. Like I'll hear like a podcast that just really resonates with me. I'll read something in a book, and I thought, I'm doing all this stuff anyway. Why not just share it in a simple weekly email along those lines? And then maybe where I, coming back to what you said, is maybe at the, like in the footer of that email or somewhere in the, in the body of that email, there's just like a quick, hey, if you want to connect with me around my social purpose initiatives, click here, and it takes them to my personal site. If you're a buyer or seller, you want to connect with me in the real estate space, click here, and it takes them to my business site. So they're getting that kind of subtle reminder when they're getting like a value add weekly email that, oh yeah, that's right, this guy's telling me about this great, podcast that, he was a guest on, and provided a link to the podcast, and he's reminding me, by the way, here, that he's a real estate broker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be super, super subtle. I think it just needs to be very crystal clear why you do both and how they're connected. And then you don't have to worry so much about being subtle about it. It's just about being clear and direct, and making it very, just wrapping it up into the story of why these two are connected. So actually, speaking of that, that's kind of the part that I want to dive into a little bit. So you've got this background, you've got a really unique business model, and there's people listening that probably go, wow, that's, I have a mortgage background, or I know somebody in the business like that. But set that aside, and let's talk about just how did you get into and make that transition from just kind of being in business and keeping the head down and focus on growing the business to wanting to do something more in the social good arena through the business. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So I tell people that there's really three events that put me on this path, and I'll go through quickly. So the first was actually a really good thing. It was I coached. I told you there was baseball in the background.
Yep.
I coached my son's travel baseball team for approximately 6 years, and it culminated in this baseball tournament in Cooperstown, New York, when they were 12 years old. We took the team across the country. They play in this tournament. There's 100 teams from across the country in the tournament. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, that's for another podcast, but watching these kids go from 6 years old to 12 years old and watch how they develop and all that they accomplished on the baseball field. And by the way, I'm a real baseball nerd. I'm that guy that believes that everything that a kid learns on a baseball field, it has practical applications to all of life's worthy pursuits. I mean, the lessons that you're learning in sports or on a baseball field, they'll help you throughout your life if you really understand the lessons. And so I realized at the end of that 6-year run as their coach that I really enjoyed teaching. I really enjoyed coaching. I had never done anything like that before. And I really felt like, even though that was the end of my journey as their baseball coach, that I wanted to make sure they understood that those lessons that they had learned over the previous 6 years had those practical applications. So I was trying to figure out how to do that. I was, in my back of my mind, I was thinking about, do I do it in the form of writing a book and then shortly after that, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I'm one of those people that our family knew nothing about type 1 diabetes. I thought diabetes meant, well, you probably shouldn't eat sugar. And there's a lot of people that think that. But, there's type 1 and type 2. And type 1 is it's a pretty serious deal. It's your pancreas stops producing insulin. Can be devastating complications from it. It changes your life and it changes your family's life. My son was 13 at the time when he was diagnosed. And so, he's under our roof, and it changes a lot of things. So as a dad, this idea of, teaching my son Ryan, all the lessons that he had learned on a baseball field had practical applications to all of life's worthy pursuits. Now it took on new meaning in terms of managing a chronic disease like type 1 diabetes. It's a daily battle. And so I thought, I need to make sure that he uses those lessons to help, fight this chronic disease and manage this chronic disease. So that happened. And then the third event is, unfortunately, I lost my sister suddenly in a traffic. She was in a traffic accident,
Oh, wow.
and she was just 50. Yeah, she was just 50 years old. So
Goodness.
yeah, so so really you've got the really good event. You've got the baseball, and I kind of really felt like I learned a lot about myself, and that I wanted to be I liked coaching, I liked teaching. The type 1, of course, the other 2 events are events I wish never would have happened, but life works in the way it does, and we have to learn from these events and grow from them. And so the losing my sister is where I really started. Like, my brother-in-law asked for me to speak at her service, and I really wanted to get this right. I really wanted to talk about how she had made a difference in my life. And it was at that point, it was like this thing went off in my head, and I thought, okay, this is what life's really about. Our greatest legacy is the stories people tell about us after we're gone, and the people are going to tell stories if you've made a positive difference in their life. And so, essentially, I just, I went all in on it, and I started feeling like I knew how I was growing personally, and what I was passionate about. I got with the type 1, I got involved with JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And I was going all in personally. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm not 2 people. It's not, I can't be one person personally and then, another person professionally. So I started thinking, how do I incorporate this into, my business? And initially it was really simple. It was, okay, when I work with clients, I'm going to take a portion and make a donation to JDRF because that's my family's story, and I have a passion around JDRF. And then it didn't take long for me to realize that, everybody has a story, and all my clients had a story. I mean, they may, a client may have lost a loved one to cancer or Alzheimer's or something else. As passionate as I was around type 1 diabetes advocacy, I realized my clients, although when they understood my story and how it was, how it had transformed my business model and how that was benefiting them, inevitably they would share their family story. And then so what I quickly started doing is I said, okay, when I work with people, I'm going to not only make a donation to JDRF, I'm going to make a donation to the charity or cause that my client's passionate about. And then in those rare cases where, and this happened once in a while, where a client said, well, there's not really any cause or passion that comes to mind. Sometimes they would say, they just take that portion and donate it to JDRF because they understood my family story. But the other thing that I did is I decided, I've lived in the area I live in, I've lived here my entire life. And so I was familiar with some charities, and I started embedding some charities that I thought were doing good work in the communities. And I essentially, what I'll do is, if a client comes back to me and says, well, I really don't have a charity or cause that I'm passionate about, I'll introduce them to some nonprofits in our community, and let them decide and say, if one of these jumps out at you, then, I'll make the donation on your behalf to that charity.
Very cool. Yeah.
And so it's continuing to grow. And I made a comment that I've never been more passionate about my business, after, it's just been over 30 years. And my mind's just racing all the time about where this is going to take me. And it feels good. And that's I guess that was a long answer to your question.
It's perfect though. And it's awesome. Let me ask you just real briefly. So, just on the mechanical side of things, when you're introducing them to like a local nonprofit that they may not be aware of, I'm obviously you're setting that kind of in the initial meeting or a couple of meetings, but does mostly them like presenting them the charities, getting them to choose one, does that take place kind of towards the end of their transaction?
Yeah, it takes place. It takes place kind of towards the end. And here's, I'm not shy about kind of telling the story, but here's the difficult part. If I was in a business where I was selling, whatever, widgets or something that's like a low price point,
okay,
I would probably come on stronger in the beginning with the social purpose part of my model.
Uh-huh.
but it's definitely there, and it's on my website and people see it. But what I realize, and this of course makes sense, is, we're in the business of helping people in high ticket stuff. I mean, and
Right.
so someone may really think, hey, Scott's, got an interesting story. He's a good guy, and I like Scott. But at the end of the day, if they're selling their $2 million home, they want to make sure they have the right person, on their side.
Right.
And, kind of like you were saying earlier, I mean, they don't want to know how a watch works. They want to know what time it is, and they want to make sure the person that they've got there in their court is the right person. So as someone may resonate with my story and like me, but if they're listing a home that's 3 counties away from me, I'll tell them right up front. I mean, I'm licensed in California. I can help you, but the truth of the matter is I'm probably not your guy, and I'll help them find the right person. So back to your question is, I and I tell people, when I tell them my story, like in an introductory meeting, or we talk about the social purpose part. Tell people about my business model, and my business model is really like save money, save time, save lives. And if I had a tagline, that whatever you want to call it, but I tell people the uniqueness of the social purpose aspect of my business model. But I always tell them, I said, but that's not why you use me. Don't use me because of my story, or because I have a social purpose business model. Use me because you think I'm the right person that's going to get the job done. And I'll, of course, tell them why I think I'm the right person, if in fact I believe I am the right person. And then the social purpose part is, it's gravy. It's just, something that we hear more and more over the last few years that consumers want to support brands that they think are, have a good story behind them, or that maybe bring them into a bigger story or a bigger experience. And I think in my small little world here in my community, I think that I do that. It's not meant to be strategic. I do it for authentic reasons. And I think people resonate with it and like it. But because we're in real estate, high ticket items, important events in people's life, they first and foremost need to know that we know what we're doing, or that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. I would agree. And Greg, you guys have been kind of active in the community, active in nonprofits. You had the wrapped vehicle, the wrapped truck that was, at a nonprofits events all over town, stuff like that. So you guys have always been involved in that arena. But I would say the same thing about you guys, and this probably comes from your dad. It's always about the other person first, and what you can do for them, and what you can do to support their goals. And then any additional things like that, like the social good, can come, but it doesn't substitute for you being the right person and being trustworthy and competent.
No. Yeah. We always talk about blessing and prospering before receiving, so go out and bring the value to the community, your clients, everyone around you, and then the bounty will flow back. And I've told actually, I was having a conversation with one of my lenders today about this, is that there was a past client of mine, and he has a property in Oakland. And he hit me up. He's like, hey, I want to sell my house, blah, blah, blah. He's like, but I really need a professional who knows the area. And I'm like, I'm not your guy. I can help you find the right person. I gave him a referral, but I knew that I could not serve my client at the highest level that he's going to require. No matter how much money I stood to make, I still wasn't going to be the right agent for him. Yeah. And that's where a lot of people fall short. They just see dollar signs, and they're kind of a real estate hoe, and they'll go anywhere for a dollar. When you just stay in your lane and refer out, you look at your time use and say, okay, you know what? Can I go to Sacramento, an hour and a half away from me, to show a house or two? I could, but is it the best thing? I don't know what areas are good. I don't know what the market's like up there. I'll just refer to a top agent up there. I'll make my money on my referral, and I can keep working in my area. That's serving at the highest levels, and it's not being greedy. So Scott, that sounds like what you're doing. I love it. There was a stat that was done before, and it stated the fact that, because you got into the philanthropic endeavors of your clients, right? They said that, on a 14% more, I'm saying this completely wrong. When you have the same philanthropic mindset as someone else, they are 14% more likely to work with you than not. if they're going to give to type 1 diabetes. Well, they have their child, their grandchild, their kid, their wife, their husband has type 1. Great. Now they want to work with you because it plucks on their heartstrings. And I think I love the fact, I hate the fact that your son got type 1, but I love the fact that you're so proactive on it, and you're not sitting back and just going, well, life's a bitch, let's go for a ride. You're like, no, dude, we're going to take this, we're going to tackle it, we're going to do it as a team, and we're going to find the best solution. And people are seeing that, and I love how that's resonating positively in your life. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate your saying that. And it's just, what I think in general, we're getting better at this, but so, I've been doing this a long time, and there was certainly a time that I think in general, and certainly with me, where it was like, we were afraid to tell our story. I mean, I'm talking, several years ago, a decade ago or more, you had to just, you always had to, people were afraid to be too vulnerable or too authentic, because I think the bottom line is you're afraid you were going to, piss off a prospect and you may lose a deal. And now certainly I think that there's certain areas that, politics and religion, you always have to tread very carefully in those areas. But beyond those two, things have really switched. I mean, more and more I'm seeing people getting out there and they're being more authentic, and they're saying, they're not trying to be, they're not trying to be all things to all people. They're just basically saying, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. These are my values. And just go out there in a more authentic way about the whole thing and tell that story. And it was a little bit difficult for me at first. But it's really, I found that I have been connecting on a much deeper level with my clients. And again, this was never meant to be anything strategic, but it's really been surprising to me. I've had people that I've known for years, and I mean decades, that when I started sharing my story, they opened up and told me things that I never knew. And I'm not just talking about like a casual client. I'm talking about people that I considered to be friends. And so it's, I would just tell anyone, and certainly any new agents getting in the business, there is, as you guys, I think, will probably agree, there's a lot of vanilla in our industry. And there's a lot of people that are working their butts off and spending money and resources that at the end of the day, all they're doing is working hard to look like everybody else. Yeah. And I would just say, you've got to figure out, everybody has to kind of step back and figure out, like, where am I, who am I, where am I going? What are my what are my core values? What's my purpose? And then build everything from there, create the vision of what you're trying to build from there. And,
I'm Scott, I completely agree with you on that. The vanilla abounds in our industry. We all think we need to be high and tight, have to wear that suit and tie, look like the quote unquote air quotes professional, and everything else. But with the way this industry is changing and the world is changing, is that people want to be around people that are just like them. I mean, I work with clients all the time now in everyone would consider a luxury market. And I show up to listing appointments. I took a $2 million listing appointment from a past client I hadn't talked to in 16 years in jeans and a t-shirt and a baseball hat. I went and showed him a $1.5 million home in flip-flops in camo cargo shorts, because he showed up like that. And once you find your own tune, like, how are you going to sing? What do you want to look like? Right. And you're not ashamed of it. People will be drawn to that authenticity, not repelled. And that's what people don't understand. They don't understand that if you're just like, if it's you, like Matt loves music. So if he was doing real estate, he does his posts of him playing music and the drums and the pianos and the bass and all that other stuff. Dude, every other music lover or person that's involved with that would come and be like, dude, that's so awesome. Let's jam together. Right. Yeah. For me, I love beer. So I do a thing called Beers and Calls. I get on, I crack a beer and make cold calls, right? Right. And you wouldn't imagine, thousands of people watch these Beers and Calls, and they all talk about how they want to drink beer, or like, hey, can I drink whiskey with you? I'm drinking wine.
Yeah.
But we need that. So that's medicine for our business. But that's our soul, Xanax.
That's the lubricant for the calls.
It is.
Let's take a real quick step back and make sure that we get everyone's contact info and how people can connect with you, Scott. And then maybe we'll bat around just a couple of marketing ideas for if you're in the social entrepreneurship arena. Let's say, how can you leverage that to meet more ideal clients? So Scott, what's the best way to not only reach out and connect and maybe send referrals to you and tell us what area that you're in? And then we'll talk about the podcast real briefly, and then we'll let Greg tell people where to connect with him.
Yeah, great. So I'm in the Los Angeles area, and my backyard's really, for people from LA, I'm like the Southeast San Fernando Valley.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people know Universal Studios. I could throw a rock and hit Universal Studios.
Nice.
So that's kind of my area. So my personal site, which is kind of my hub, is scottrmorris.com. Scott, my middle initial R, Morris.com. And then the business site is SRM, as in Scott Randall Morris, realestategroup.com. And so that's the best place to start. And then you can find my social media platforms by visiting those sites.
Mm-hmm.
And
then Dreaming of Cooperstown, Apple Podcasts, so forth.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's all on all those platforms, and you can find that on the personal, the Scott R. Morris site. You'll see the podcast on there.
Yeah, that's right. Perfect. Okay. And then Greg, how do people connect with you?
They can go to bookmcdaniel.com, and you guys can go ahead and book a 30-minute conversation with me. Let's talk about the tribe Matt and I are building. We are growing this thing every single month. People are coming and joining our tribe with EXP, kind of talking about how I can show you mathematically. I can show you how you can make more money with our tribe just by selling real estate, getting paid with passive income from the people you bring on, and a really good supportive group of guys and gals over at EXP that do a lot of training, a lot of support, and they can really help you get moving sooner, in my personal opinion. So anyways, go to bookmcdaniel.com, book 30 minutes with me there. Matt, how can people give me and you and the show a 5-star review? Because we only accept 5-star rule. That's it. We don't take anything else.
Definitely go to Apple Podcasts. But one thing I do need to do a better job of talking about is my training on how to get on more podcasts, including how to hire someone and put them through this training so that they get you pitched. So if you're like Scott, and not only are you running a real estate business, but you also have something else that you can talk about, like Scott, you're doing speaking, you're talking about social entrepreneurship, you have your own podcast. So if you're in Scott's position and you want to get featured on more podcasts consistently to grow your brand, either grow it outside of real estate or just give people a better way to connect with you on a personal level about the things that you're passionate about, go to howtogetfeatured.com. So that's where we talk about how to craft your story hook, how to find the right podcast for you, how to pitch them, how to write your pitch email. All that fun stuff is on that training, as well as the course that I developed that goes behind that. So howtogetfeatured.com. Scott, let's just finish up with this. I want to bat around some ideas for how you can kind of leverage the fact that you're in, like, sharing your passion and that you're using your business for social good. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you on the boards of any of those, of the nonprofits that you support, or are you pursuing that angle yet?
I'm on the JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. I'm on their board, and I'm involved in. They have these Century Rise cycling events. So
perfect. So not only on the board, but also local events. Perfect. Yeah. Well, one of the things I feel like, especially the real estate agents that are in high ticket or what Mike LaFido would call it high end to luxury, so 2 to 3 times the average sale price in a market. One of the things I feel like agents in those spaces often overlook is the examples of financial advisors and wealth managers. And how they network and how they meet their clients, which is all through nonprofits, boards, leadership positions, helping to put together local events, meeting people at those events, being on the committees to plan those events so that there's interesting opportunities there. And then if you do any of your do you do any prospecting on LinkedIn where you connect with people and kind of reach out and proactively meet people that way?
I haven't. That's something I need to do. I'm on LinkedIn, and I've kind of, I've built my following there, but I don't have a strategy in place right now for leveraging that platform. And
Gotcha.
That's definitely something that's on my radar.
Yeah, and it's been, LinkedIn has always been on my radar. I started using it years ago. Being in podcasting is a little bit easier because it's sometimes easier to reach out to people. But in your particular position, or anyone who has an affiliation or a leadership position in kind of the nonprofit community, to me, that's one of the easiest reach outs ever. Is just through LinkedIn. You just search in LinkedIn, you see who else is involved in similar or the same causes, or shares a volunteership position with the same organization. You just search and sort out the results on LinkedIn by that. And you can reach out to people and just say, hey, I'd love to connect. I know you may not need any of my services right now, and that's cool, but looks like we're both involved with the JDRF. Just let me know if there's any way I can help or be of support, or if there's any events that I need to know about, or that you'd like the board involved in any way, please let me know. So anything simple like that. You could also screen that out so that it's not just reaching out to consumers, but you could be using it to reach out and build like a network of business referral relationships, all based around a common interest in those same types of nonprofits. So you could put together a list of, let's say, 50 to 100 people on LinkedIn, and just they're only the most strategic people. And you can link out, you can reach out through LinkedIn to just those people. So it's not about prospecting necessarily. It's about building referral relationships in a network of other business owners who all have the same passion as you. And that'd be very powerful. I mean, if you could count on one referral for every two people, every two business owners, which should be low if you keep in touch with them per year. In that we're talking, 30, 40 deals a year. From just that network of people. So, and that's something I'm working on doing better myself. Believe me, I'm not perfect at that. I do 2 reach outs a day. My goal is a couple of really good high level strategic introductions outbound per week. But I don't hit that all the time. Introductions have to kind of, when they present themselves, great. Sometimes they don't. But the more that we reach out, and LinkedIn is a great place to do it, the more those opportunities present themselves. So just wanted to throw something out for people that may be listening and going, okay, well, how does this link directly up to getting more business? To me, that's the best way to leverage it.
Awesome.
Cool. Greg, anything else you want to, you were quiet on that section as far as like leveraging nonprofits and things like that to bring in new business. Anything you want to say on that before we wrap things up?
I was just sending a message via Facebook Messenger to a business owner here in the area to set up an interview with him that I've been planning to do for months.
Nice.
So.
Well, I'm glad if you're going to bail out of your attention on the podcast that it's at least for a good reason.
No, I wasn't paying attention. I was just like, shit. I'm like, but
so no, that's what's great about Greg. He takes action on everything I say. And that's a great example for the world to follow. All right.
No, but actually what I am doing for local businesses, I went out and bought a DSLR T7i Canon camera with a light mount and some inputs for lavaliers and stuff like that, so I can do higher level videos. So then I can have my marketing team, aka Viral, edit them as my special project, and then I can take that and I can say, here, Scott, Mr. Business Owner, here is a video that will promote you and your business free to use in all of your promotions, aka I will be in it as well. So I'm going to be visible, but they're going to also be able to raw copy of just their stuff so they can push it out as well. So it seems to be working really well. I have a bunch of interviews scheduled, and we're going to start rolling this out. So we'll see. I really think there's a lot to it, and I love it. People love it as well. But they always think there's a catch. They're like, what do you mean it's free? Like, it's free. Yeah,
it is hard. For anybody that doesn't understand content marketing, it's sometimes hard for them to wrap their head around that. They think it's you, the first part of like you trying to sell them something. But yeah, get over it. They'll get over it. Okay. Well, Scott, first of all, thank you very much, and we appreciate you opening up and sharing your story. And I hope people connect, and I hope they reach out and kind of connect with you through the podcast. And hopefully, if there's anybody in the audience that's listening, if you feel like you might be a good guest, or if you know a good guest or a good topic of conversation that you'd like to hear about from Scott on his show, please reach out. Make sure to connect and message him and all that good stuff. And Scott, I've already got somebody in mind I think would be a good introduction for you, somebody that has very much a very similar story. We'll talk about that behind the scenes, but I know there's going to be people in the audience that would definitely love to hear the podcast, and so I hope they do. So Scott, thank you to you. And Greg, shall we put a nice let's put a blue bow. I don't know what color.
Let me just say thanks to you guys too, though. I really enjoy the show. You guys put a lot of great stuff out there, and so I really appreciate you having me on. But I appreciate all you're doing.
Oh, yeah, our pleasure. You. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me to message the business owner. I appreciate that. All right, Matt. So we're putting a blue bow.
Blue bow around the episode.
Not blue balls. No. Got it. Okay. bow.
And thank you for making sure that this episode is unshareable for Scott.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. No, it's a blue bow, Matt. Get your mind out of the gutter. So guys, thank you for watching. Scott, really appreciate it, man. You were doing something that I think a lot of us forget to do, and that's have empathy and have a true passion for something. So I hope people can take this. I hope that they can go and emulate you and really start making a difference in other people's lives, because doing that will bring the riches, will bring the success that they're chasing. But first, they have to be giving of themselves, and you're doing it. So thank you, my friend. All right, guys, we love you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for calling Matt on his cell phone, because he'll come over and wash your car with rocks. Anyways, guys, until next time, peace out, ninjas. Oh, God.